Hey everybody, welcome to the Football Savant podcast. I'm Travis Tyler. It's Tyler Williams here. He actually has video today, so
Yeah,
you
dude.
get to see that. So today is November 2nd, 2022, and we're talking college football. What are we up to? Weeks 8 and 9? Is that what this is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So Tyler, one game I particularly watched last week that figured we both have some thoughts on was the Ohio State Penn State game. So let's start there.
Yeah, man. It's weird because I'm a little conflicted with good and bad performance for Ohio State. You look at it, and I think a lot of us coming into the season, Travis, kind of thought that with Penn State, we knew they had a pretty good secondary with Joey Porter Jr. We typically thought it would be that same kind of Penn State run defense, and then they ran into Michigan, who rushed for over 400 yards. A lot of what Ohio State does successful is they run the football, they kind of pound it, and then their offense is kind of predicated on that play action.
Right.
So what I would have liked to have seen at Ohio State this past week was for them to put on a similar performance. And I understand that Happy Valley is a tough place to play. They're coming off a whiteout game against Minnesota. It's not an easy place to play. But man, I'm looking up, and with 9 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, Ohio State's averaging 2.1 yards per carry on a team that just got gutted, a few weeks ago for 400 yards by Michigan. So the O-line's got to play better. That's not going to cut it in the playoff. It's probably not going to cut it against Michigan in a few weeks. So that was, kind of the bad takeaway. Now, the good takeaway, though, is their defense and Jim Knowles are continuing to get better every week, including true freshman JT Tuyamalo, whatever the hell his name is. I tried to forget it after he snubbed Oregon on National Signing Day, but dude, what a performance from that kid, man. Did you see something different, Travis? What did you see?
I saw a lot of what you're talking about. Honestly, the running game didn't really cross my mind because I'm so used to seeing Stroud just air it out to all those receivers over
100%.
But Henderson and did Ryan Williams play in this game? I can't remember.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so they weren't getting them at the same clip that Blake Corum was getting them for Michigan. At the same time, Corum was playing out of his mind all season.
And even when he went out, Donovan Edwards gassed Penn State's D.
Yeah, so a lot of that, yes, is probably part of the offensive line for Ohio State. It's also a part about corrections for Penn State and making, taking a certain approach in certain games. And seeing what didn't work earlier in the season and stuff like that. And I'm like, having been to Happy Valley, I'm a big proponent that definitely changed that, how close Penn State would have been in either of those games. So
sure. Oh yeah, I agree.
It's the loudest stadium I've ever been to. I will say that, and it's tough for any opposing team to go in there at all, and especially their history. They have Ohio State's number in that stadium. Even though James Franklin, doesn't quite finish teams off very often, which this was, another example of that.
Do you think that played into it, Travis, with Ryan Day knowing that they've kind of had their number a little bit and played in some close games and won one or two? Do you think that played into it all, or was it just a bad performance from the O-line and Ohio State fans should be happy because Ohio State's proven that they can win the tough, gritty games against Notre Dame and Penn State, and also, start off slow and then blow teams out like Iowa.
It could have played into it. I don't think it affected it as much as other factors like the stadium or the performance from CJ Stroud. Like, he was, you look at his numbers, he was fine, but if you watch the game, he didn't have very great command of the pocket when he dropped back there. And they really relied on that defense to end up closing the door and getting that big lead at the end.
Yeah, they let Penn State hang around and seemed to really kick it into another gear there with 9 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. And what's funny, like you mentioned, Travis, is if you didn't watch that game and you looked at it, if you look at the end box score, you go, oh, Ohio State never worried. But the weird thing is that was a ball game until 9 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter until, the young freshman JT took it over. That's interesting. Good point. Let's move to the Big 12, Travis. What a game. Kansas State and Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to say on that. I mean, it's the worst loss in series history. You look at it, Adrian Martinez, starting quarterback for Kansas State, out again. So you got a backup quarterback who comes in and played really well. And then Deuce Vaughn does what Deuce Vaughn does, 176 scrimmage yards and 2 tuds. Oklahoma State, it seemed like, had no answers on either side of the ball. I don't even know what to make of that. What bad game by Oklahoma State, or are we not taking Kansas State serious enough?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think we've been taking Kansas State seriously enough because of what their record is now, and because they're second place in the Big 12 right now.
Yeah.
But we've all thought it was, Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez that were kind of doing the whole thing. And Will Howard kind of showed up and was like, wait a minute, I can do much better. And their passing attack just woke up, and I think that caught everybody by surprise. And we probably had a case where Oklahoma State was gearing up to have to stop the run, and Will Howard just showed up and aired it out in a fantastic game against them.
Yeah, you don't usually see that too often. A Mike Gundy team, at least in conference, getting, absolutely blown out. Worst loss in series history, 48-0. That obviously, I don't know. Travis, do you think that loss takes Oklahoma State out of winning the Big 12? It certainly puts a hinder on their playoff chances when TCU's still undefeated and play as well as they have.
Yeah, it makes it harder. I don't know if it necessarily knocks them out. TCU's gonna be in the conference championship probably, and then you still got 3 teams still vying for that last spot. So as long as they keep winning, they'll have a shot, which I know is kind of a cliche answer there, but I don't think the one loss kind of screws in the conference play. It's definitely harder to take in terms of the playoff, which we'll get to later. But
yeah, no, I think you're right. Speaking of 3-team races, I don't know if we have any AAC fans that listen to the podcast, but if we do, we're going to touch a little bit on that. Cincy UCF, kind of a weird game. I like what Luke Fickell has done down there. I think a lot of us, or at least I shouldn't speak for everybody, at least myself, kind of thought that Cincy might be a one-hit wonder. But, I was looking before the podcast, Travis, and in their last 4 seasons, they're 44-7 and 19 straight conference wins.
Yeah, that's impressive.
It looked like one of those games where each team was just struggling to get all the yards looked hard to come by.
Yeah.
But UCF pulls off the win over Cincy, and it leaves the AAC wide open, Travis. You got Cincy, Houston, UCF, all 3-1 in conference, and an unbeaten Tulane.
Yeah.
What was your take on that game, and how do you think the AAC shakes out?
I really like Tulane right now. Just the way they've been playing. They beat Kansas State earlier this year, so that's an impressive win. And their offense, how impressive that from going from 2-10 to ranked 18th in the latest playoff rankings. That's ridiculous. And I think in terms of this Cincinnati UCF game, I only saw the last couple of minutes where they scored. I think it was 3 touchdowns total in 10 minutes, and we're just going back and forth.
Yeah, pretty boring game until those last couple of minutes.
Yeah, well, what really stood out to me was, Ben Bryant is a much different quarterback than what Cincinnati's used to having. And that very last possession where UCF just had so much pressure on him. He's not the mobile guy that they've had the past couple of years with Desmond Ridder. Get out of there and go down the field.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, that's going to hinder their chances of. They're probably out of a New Year's Six game by now with that loss there. But I guess the conference is still up for grabs, so there's silver lining for them there.
It's going to be fun to actually see the AAC matter other than just Cincinnati coming out of it. It's kind of cool to see it. And as we said, Tulane's the only unbeaten team. They face Tulsa this weekend. They're actually only 3.5-point favorites, or I'm sorry, 7.5-point favorites. So we'll see how that goes. That one might be a shootout.
It's on the road,
Tulane and Tulsa.
It's at Tulsa, so that tracks a little bit. but
Hey, let's go.
I expected better from Tulsa this year too. I will say they've been worse than what I thought they would be.
No, I agree with that. That might be a fun game to watch. A little bit of a shootout there, and we'll certainly keep our eyes on the AAC as that continues to unfold. Jump around to the SEC, Travis, Tennessee, Kentucky. Man, Hendon Hooker looks like he's having one of those really special seasons, like we see every once in a while, like a Cam Newton, a Joe Burrow, a Johnny Manziel. They manhandled Kentucky, and I'll speak for myself, Travis. I don't know. Maybe I'll speak for everybody. If any of us know what Kentucky is or how good they are, but at the end of the day, you look at it, and regardless of what they are, how good they are, it was an SEC opponent, and they went out and they handled business. And Hendon Hooker continues to bolster his case for the Heisman.
Yeah, I would say we might be getting into this a little later, but for me, he's right at the top of that conversation. And in terms of the actual game, it's another one like the Oklahoma State, Kansas State game we talked about. I don't think anybody saw it coming that badly. Everybody knew Tennessee was pretty good, especially after that Alabama win, and then Kentucky was supposed to be pretty good going into the year. And, everybody was talking about it. We've talked about this before. You've asked me about Levis and his draft stock or whatever. That took a huge tumble in that game. Had under 100 yards passing, 3 interceptions. They only scored 6 points. And, Kentucky's kind of a team that prided itself on its defense, and they didn't show up in this one.
Didn't show up at all.
It was very impressive, and probably a lot of the reason why Tennessee is up at number 1 where they are right now.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk more about those rankings more in a minute, but I agree, and again, I don't think anybody really knows what Kentucky is, and I'm sure some anti-Tennessee fans will throw up that argument, but at the end of the day, it's an SEC opponent who was ranked for much of the season so far, who's got a potential, as you mentioned, we talked about Will Levis's draft.
There's NFL talent on the roster. Yeah.
There's NFL talent on the roster, and they went out, and that's a game that they could have potentially been a sleeper game, looking at the Georgia game coming up next week. That's almost one of those trap games.
Yeah.
And they went out and handled business. Handled business as if they were playing Bama or Georgia. They didn't play down to their opponent. They played who they were. So I'm impressed regardless.
And that's what good teams do. Show up and win no matter where it is.
And kudos, and again, I hate to keep saying we'll talk more on this in a minute, but we will. But also kudos to Josh Heupel for getting those guys ready, because everyone in the media is giving Tennessee their roses and their flowers, and that's an easy game to look ahead next week to Georgia and come out and lay an egg against again, we don't know what Kentucky is, but again, like you mentioned, great point, Travis, there's NFL talent in their top SEC team, at least for much of the season so far. Yeah. So credit to them and Josh Heupel for getting them ready and going out and playing.
Yeah, that's a team in Tennessee that was, left for dead a couple of years ago with the whole recruiting scandal and Jeremy Pruitt and all that. And
people forget about that. People like to think that
wasn't that long ago.
That was not that long ago, dude. So what he's done, I mean, I think a lot of people, myself included, I'm a Josh Heupel fan, but I certainly thought it would take a couple recruiting classes to do this. I mean, he's not doing this with his guys. He's doing this with the same roster. And forgive me, I don't know what the record was last year, but it wasn't good because nobody projected Tennessee to even be a ranked team.
7-5, 6-6, something like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of those wins were a few non-conference cupcakes and your Vanderbilts, and
they lost to Purdue in a bowl game.
Lost to Purdue, so, yes, that's correct. Yeah. So I certainly didn't see this coming. I don't think a lot of us did. So kudos to them.
And Hooker too. I mean, just. Even when he transferred, he lost the starting competition to Joe Milton at first.
Yeah,
and now
guys playing out of his mind.
Yeah.
Before we go into our playoff rankings, just a side note here. As an Oregon fan, it's becoming an annual thing, and I don't think we talked about this, Travis, but I wanted to mention this is the Pac-12 ref blunders that we constantly have that are notable. I don't know if you got a chance to see this, Travis. I know I'm kind of going off script here for a second, but Man, I'm watching that USC Arizona game late at night, and it's right before half. Caleb Williams throws a 34-yard dot to Brendan Rice. They get to the Arizona 10. Now, we all know that in college, when you get a first down, clock stops, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's 5 seconds left on the clock. The refs continue to let the clock run as they spot the ball, which 5 seconds would have been enough for them to spike it, kick a field goal, and go into half.
Okay.
They let the clock run out. They have a discussion and review it, and somehow still come to the conclusion that the time ran out in the half. It was embarrassing, and it's like an every year annual thing now. And that's a game where, it doesn't matter now because USC got the win, but that has major implications because USC is in the mix, and you're talking about them playing a beaten, downtrodden Arizona team. That one blunder of them not getting that field goal at half could have had major implications, not just on USC, but as the Pac-12, as the playoff, as the season as a whole. So I know a couple people were tweeting me about that, so I wanted to bring that up and at least get that out there. So. It's becoming a nightmare, I can tell you that.
Yeah, you can't have the refs affecting conference races like that.
No, man, that's huge.
Imagine if that happened for a tying score in the conference championship game. Or winning score even.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I don't know. Again, people will look back and say it doesn't matter, but I personally think it does. I mean, that's not just USC, that's the Pac-12, and that's the entire playoff race potentially as a whole that you're affecting. And the weird thing is, Travis, is this isn't a new rule. I mean, how long has that rule been affecting college where the clock stops after a first down? So if it was a new rule where they're trying to get adjusted to it, okay, I get it, but you can't blow one that big, right? Speaking of that, let's go to playoff rankings, Travis. What did we got the committee's first playoff rankings. I only have one small issue with it, and I think it's probably the same issue as you have, and that's Clemson. But for the most part, I think they got it right. I would have switched it up a little bit. Travis, what's your opinion on the playoff rankings from the committee?
I think they got the top 3 definitely right, and most of the top 7 or 8, if not the top 10, right? I do think, like everybody, Clemson hasn't been impressive. I think Michigan's better than them. I think Alabama's better than them. Maybe you could conceivably make a TCU argument there, but I'm not ready to go there yet.
I did. I did.
Okay. I mean, wherever you see it go, I think TCU has a better offense. I'm not sure, or more explosive offense. I'm not sure where their defenses stack up against each other if they were to play. I think could be a good game, but we'll see if it ends up happening at the end here. But Clemson, I don't think is that good of a team. I just think that with the ACC, the schedule they play, there's a good shot they're going undefeated. And undefeated Clemson team is getting into the playoff, no matter over a 1-loss team, pretty much every time.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, and it kind of sucks because I think the consensus around Clemson is that we don't think at this point in time, at least 9 weeks into the season, that they're a top 4 team. But really, when you look at the playoff, the way it sits right now, they're more than likely to go undefeated. So really, you're looking at all these other really good teams vying for 3 spots. Because if Clemson wins out, they're, like you mentioned, they're getting in. I'll just tell you right now, I do think they kind of missed it on Clemson, but I was really glad to see them put Tennessee first because I think Tennessee deserves it. They've got more stronger wins than anybody in the country. And to be honest, it was kind of a bold thing to do to put them in front of, they're while they've proved it this year, I could see where it would be easy as a committee to say, well, you haven't beat Georgia yet, you haven't done that. So I could see them making a case for it, but I was glad when the rankings came out to see that they got away from what we wanted to get away from with the BCS stuff, which is don't look at the brand, look at the eye test of what's been on the field. And I was glad that was the big issue that I think myself and you and everybody had with the BCS was it was more brand than it was product on the field.
Yeah, and I was glad to see they did that. I just was shocked that they actually did it.
I was too.
Yeah.
I was too, but I like it.
Yeah, they've definitely, the way they're playing. I mean, we talked about the Vols a little bit already in this episode. They deserve it up there. And one thing that really stood out to me was that they had USC and Oregon ranked all the way down there. They're making it pretty much impossible for a one-loss Pac-12 team to get in there.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
I noticed that too. And again, especially when, like we just said, you're vying for 3 spots because
yeah,
unless Clemson loses, it's almost impossible for a one-loss Pac-12 team to get in there. But I tried not to focus too much on that,
yeah,
being a Duck fan, because there's still a lot of shakeup that can happen.
yeah,
We got some big games this week, and we get into conference championships. I still think if you're sitting right now in the top 10, 11,
yeah.
12,
It's
maybe.
usually a good range to be.
Yeah, I think you potentially, if you handle business and win out, that's all you can do, and that should put you in a decent position, because a lot of these teams are going to play each other, so
Yeah,
it'll get figured out one way or the other, right?
yeah. Like Michigan, Ohio State's going to sort itself out.
Bingo.
The I don't even know who the SEC championship is at least going to sort some of it out.
At least, yeah.
I don't know if it's I don't have the schedule in my head offhand, but but
No, I don't either. But you are right.
Yeah,
A lot of this will settle itself
yeah,
out, and it may just make it even more confusing. But it also has the ability to let some of those teams that are sitting at 7, 8, 9, 10
yeah.
potentially jump in and get a spot in the playoff.
Yeah, and those teams, I'm really interested to see how TCU comes out the rest of their games. See if they give themselves more of a shot to get in there.
Travis, let me ask you this: if you were the committee, and I'm going to put a tough one on you here,
Oh,
and
boy.
let's just say you've got a 1-loss Tennessee, a 1-loss Georgia, a 1-loss Bama, but then you've got and a 1-loss Michigan, but you've got an undefeated Ohio State, undefeated TCU, and undefeated Clemson. What do you even do with that? I mean, where do you go with that?
Wow.
I would assume. Let's assume
you're gonna make it hard.
Well, let's assume. Let's break it down. Let's assume Michigan's out if they would lose to Ohio State.
Yes, that's okay.
So we got a 1-loss Tennessee, a 1-loss Georgia, an undefeated Ohio State, Clemson, and TCU. I mean, that's a tough one to answer, man. I mean, Clemson, it's like you said. I mean, Clemson's more than likely gonna get in if they're undefeated, but I just don't know what you do, because
it's hard to put a 1-loss SEC team behind them.
Yeah. But do you think?
I think there might be like a 50-50 shot, maybe better that they would flip SEC team in there instead.
Over an undefeated Clemson or TCU?
Just based on strength of schedule and strength of wins. But that scenario, I would love to see how it plays out. Just to see what they decide. Who's really running this committee now.
and you and I talked about this a little bit. I think last week, Travis, it's kind of frustrating because we as fans want to see the best matchups, right? And you have college football and the commissioners and the committee who have admitted that, in a sense, have admitted that the system is either flawed or could be better. That's why they're expanding it. Why wait? I don't see any benefit in waiting. I've tried to come up with answers like, sponsors. Well, sponsors are only going to get better if there's more games that are more meaningful to play. I just don't see a reason or a justifiable one, at least, that would make sense to say, no, we've admitted that it could be better or it's flawed, but we're going to wait X amount of years. This is a perfect scenario of why it should be expanded now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it should be expanded too, but I also something comes to mind about having to wait, like some legal reasons they had to wait or something like that. But I'm not totally. I mean,
You could be right on that. I actually
Yeah.
didn't go down that avenue. It could be something like that in terms of contracts that are signed with these divisions or something like that. So I didn't even actually think
Or
about that. That's
even
a good point.
availability of stadiums and stuff like that too.
Sure. Hey, it's football,
There's a
man. Put
lot
them
of
in a
things.
parking
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah,
Put them in a
exactly.
parking lot. Let's
Exactly.
go, man. Right? Yeah. Well, we'll definitely see how those play out. Let me ask you, Travis, as it sits, we're 9 weeks through the season. Who would be your front runner? And we'll get into some of these awards. Who do you think would be your front runner for Coach of the Year?
Oh, coaches, man, there's a lot of good ones. I think just what Tennessee's doing, you gotta go Heupel. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the most impressive job so far. I mean, this season they're undefeated. They're top the SEC. They're top the country. I mean, no one saw that coming. We talked a ton about them. Sonny Dykes at TCU's got to be up there too. Another undefeated team. Brett Bielema at Illinois, like they're what 16 now, one loss on
Yeah.
the season. No, I mean that was taking that job was basically a death sentence for him at the beginning. And
Yes.
he's just you turn them into a decent team in the Big Ten West, which doesn't have many decent teams to begin with.
Correct.
So I mean there are so many. I mean, you look at the Tulane coach Willie Fritz from 2-10 to
Great point.
7-1. I mean, there are so many of them to get it, but if I'm going with one, it's got to be Heupel.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's and we are very quickly becoming a Tennessee pro podcast.
At least on
here.
this episode, yeah.
Yeah, man, we're gonna have to title this one for something for Tennessee fans
I'm not
because it
wearing any
is.
orange though, so
I'm not either. I am not either. No, I think you make a great point though. I mean, Josh Heupel is coming in. He's taking over a program that had 7-8 wins last year, as you mentioned earlier. Doesn't didn't have a full recruiting class, and what he's been able to do has been nothing short of remarkable. I agree with you. There are some dark horses like Sonny Dykes, maybe even a Dan Lanning, depending on how Oregon continues to play.
Yeah.
Chip Kelly's done a really remarkable job, and we've talked about that in past episodes and how far he's come from what he took over at UCLA. Dino, absolutely. And I would even say, and this is arguable, but maybe even Jim Harbaugh, because we thought after what they lost last year that was a fluke and that they would never be in contention with Ohio State, at least for another couple of years. I mean, we were talking 6 months ago that Harbaugh might take the Vikings job. I mean, so I don't think any of us thought. So credit to him for overcoming all of that. They had some recruits decommit during that time, lost some talent to the NFL. So kudos to Jim Harbaugh as well. He continues to just win 9-10 games every season now. So I think that's a testament to him as well.
You forget about the calls for Harbaugh's job before. I mean, before COVID hit, they were what, like a 3-5 team, something like
Dude,
that.
they wanted him gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah, it was
you're
bad.
right. You're right about that. That's another one where we like to push it back and go, well, that was a long time. No, that really was 2 years ago. I mean, 2-3 years ago. I mean, so yeah, I think he's done a really good job as well. Another award, let's talk about it. Heisman, Travis. Who are some of your favorites? I got a couple takes on this, but I'm interested to see who you think.
I mean, this is gonna sound so
just do it, dude. Just do it.
Hendon Hooker's playing the best of any quarterback in the country on a good team, I would say. CJ Stroud's right behind him probably, but that performance against Penn State wasn't really Heisman worthy. The stats are there. The way he played wasn't really, big game. Where Hooker just showed up. He showed up in every game so far this season, especially on Saturday against Kentucky. And then I think, as much as I hate to say it, as a Michigan State guy, when Kenneth Walker got snubbed last year, wasn't even invited. Blake Corum's playing at a similar level this year.
100%.
Over 1,000 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns, on pace for possibly more touchdowns, but around the same rushing stats. And because of the brand they're going to get, he's probably going to get invited, and because of they're going to be at least one game better than what we were last year. He's going to get that unless something catastrophic happens. But
no, I agree, and I'll tell you this. I looked it up prior to the show, and in my mind, I thought Hendon Hooker was running away with it. I looked it up, and here's what's kind of funny. Hendon Hooker right now, 9 weeks in, he's got 2338 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 1 interception, 71.2 completion percentage, 10.7 yards per attempt, to go along with 338 on the ground, 4 rushing touchdowns, and a 91.2 QBR. Okay.
Mhm.
Stroud's got 2377, so a little bit more passing yards, 29 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, 71.3 completion percentage, so 0.1 higher, the exact same yards per attempt, 10.7, and his QBR is 93.1 to Hendon Hooker's 91.2. So the numbers are actually
they're right
eerily
there.
similar.
Yeah.
They're right there. I just think that right now, Hendon Hooker's done it on more of a primetime stage. He's the better story right now.
He's played stronger teams overall.
He's played stronger teams. He hasn't had
competition,
Rutgers, and yes, I agree with that. But they are eerily similar. I will say this: the one dark horse when I was looking this up was I was actually really surprised with this was Drake May. 2,600 pass yards, 29 touchdowns, 3 picks. Again, 71.3, same completion percentage as Stroud, 1 point better than Hendon Hooker. 439 rush yards, 3 touchdowns, 90.2 QBR. So Drake May is playing really, really well right now as well. Now, I don't think he'll win it. I would agree with you. I think it's right now Hooker, Stroud, Corn.
But May is what makes North Carolina's offense go, and what
100%
why they're doing so much better this year. They're going to be that team that Clemson's playing in the conference championship, because there's no competition in that.
Correct. And it's funny, as I looked at that and I saw Drake May at 2,600 passing yards, I think most of those came against Appalachian State week 1.
That was a hell of a game.
that was a hell of a game. Real quick, Bryan Harsin. I think we all knew this was coming, just a matter of time when he had some off-season drama, some rumors of cheating on his wife. Recruits were saying negative things about the program. So I think Harsin was in a tough position. Travis, were you at all surprised by that firing?
I'm not surprised he got fired. At this point, I didn't think it was coming during the season.
That's fair.
I thought they were going to wait till the end, but I mean, he lost his grip on. I don't think it was a great fit to begin with.
I don't either.
From Boise State to the SEC, but he kind of everything just unraveled while he was there, and so it just became more apparent that he wasn't the guy, and that they needed to do something about it.
I agree with all of that. A couple minutes left, Travis. Let's look ahead to next week. And of course, we'll talk about these games on next week's podcast as they air out, but let's go over them. Decent slate of games here for sure. We got Oregon State at Washington. That game's in Seattle. Obviously, we have the big boy one. That's Tennessee and Georgia in Athens. We got Bama and LSU. That one's in Baton Rouge. And we got Texas in Manhattan, Kansas against K-State. Travis, what is your opinion on the games coming up? Any upsets, any surprises? What are you thinking, man?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with that Oregon State Washington game. Oregon State was kind of someone that we kind of picked out at the beginning of the season as a sleeper team in the Pac-12 just because of their they had what at the time was supposed to be an NFL caliber quarterback. They had a bunch of experience. Chance Nolan hasn't played that well this year. I think that could be a huge factor in this one, especially with the way that Washington's gotten after some quarterbacks lately. And and Penix on Washington's side with their passing game. A couple passing teams I think have given Oregon State a little more trouble than they would have liked this year.
100%.
And then the Tennessee Georgia game, obviously, I don't even know where to go with this one. It's going to be a fun game to watch. Georgia's going to be without their best pass rusher, so that's going to be a huge thing on that side.
Same thing I had down.
Yeah, so
it's going to be tough.
I mean, imagine Tennessee putting up a game like they did against Kentucky against Georgia. That would just make the whole country explode on that. It's just, I think it's going to be a good close game. I'm not even gonna bother picking out of that one.
Yeah,
It's too much.
I agree. The over under 66, I think that's high. I don't think it's going to be a shootout. I actually see it being a pretty close game. And I don't see it being a particularly high scoring game because I think those are two good defenses, and it's very evenly matched when you look at their stats, where they rank in the country. Real quick, Travis, Bama, LSU. Bama's favored by 13.5. I think that's a lot. But at the same time, if you told me that Bama beat LSU by a bunch, I don't know if I'd be super shocked, just because it looks like, Travis, you and I talked about this last week, LSU's recent success has been the entire Jaden Daniels show.
Yeah.
He's 60% of their offense between passing and running. I don't know if that's going to work against a Will Anderson-led Bama defense, but
I'm with you
I
on
could
that,
be wrong.
Yeah, and I think LSU being ranked 10 is insanely low, high, however you look at it. They're not a top 10 team. They've been solid top 20, sure, maybe, but top 10, not at all. It's hard. I get why they did that, because they beat Ole Miss and they're one spot ahead of Ole Miss, but they're not a top 10 team. And I think, that's a little high of a line, but I think Bama's a much better team and easily wins that one.
And I'm going to get this in on camera. Notre Dame over Clemson. That's my upset of the week right there. I'm taking it. Marcus Freeman, that game's in South Bend. Mark it on your calendar. It's coming.
I'm going to go Pittsburgh over Syracuse.
I actually had that.
Get that one.
We got a great slate of games. Of course, you guys can always come back and check us next week.